Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into, well, a really monumental global challenge, international communication, specifically for a rapidly rising global power. I mean, how do you genuinely portray yourself on the world stage, especially when that stage is often dominated by some pretty intense media scrutiny and, frankly, skepticism? We're setting out today to analyze the strategies used by expert storytellers to try and bridge that gulf. It's this critical understanding deficit that really shapes global perception.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here, I think, looking at the source material, is just the sheer scale of this challenge. China's increasing economic and, technological success has almost paradoxically been matched by this growing level of what the sources explicitly call slander and vilification, mostly from Western media outlets. So the core issue isn't just what China is accomplishing, it's how these narratives are being, filtered, sometimes blocked, or even distorted before they reach a global audience.
Right. And our mission today is really to look beyond the usual policy papers, get into the trenches with the people who actually create the content. And what we found, looking at the experiences of professionals, and this includes an Oscar-winning director from the UK, is that the strategic pivot seemed to center entirely on moving away from abstract facts, moving away from statistics and focusing instead on the simple but deeply powerful lives of ordinary people.
Okay, so let's start by maybe framing the political landscape a bit, as it's described in the sources anyway. The alleged media attack is described as pretty intense. The source material points to some really extreme claims, things like assertions of genocide in Xinjiang being widely spread by powerful media organizations, which, in the source's view, severely damages the nation's international image. It's important to note we're reporting what the sources claim here.
Yeah, absolutely. But the professor quoted in the source material offers this genuinely paradoxical take on all this negativity. It's really worth exploring. He argues that this whole phenomenon is simultaneously a bad thing. I mean, obviously, because the attacks are damaging and constant, but also, strangely, a good thing.
A good thing. How so?
Well, that's the interesting part.
Okay, and this is where the analytical lens kind of shifts, right? The professor suggests it's a good thing because it proves, or at least in his view it proves, that hostile Western forces are, out of moves. That's the phrase used. Like, they've run out of strategic geopolitical options, and now they have to rely almost entirely on just spreading rumors and falsehoods.
Wait a minute, though. Isn't that maybe a dangerous interpretation? Doesn't the sheer quantity of these attacks, even if they are untrue as the source claims, still cause real damage and maybe fatigue the people hearing the message?
That's a really good question. And the source material does address it. It connects that external pressure back to the domestic effect. The view presented is that this external hostility actually strengthens the internal unity of the Chinese people.
Aye.
Why? Because the disconnect between the media message and just, daily life is apparently so profound.
Okay.
So the argument goes, when ordinary people share the reality of their lives, which are described as modern, safe, convenient, using mobile pay, riding high-speed rails, seeing these transformed cityscapes, then the media lies will collapse by themselves. That's the idea. They suggest this external adversity has, maybe inadvertently, made the job of communicating internally much easier.
Wow. Okay, that makes the scale of change itself absolutely central to the story, then. We really have to understand that transformation. To put it in context, the UK director we mentioned, Malcolm Clark, he first went to China way back in the 1980s. And he admitted that back then, taking a filmmaking assignment there was considered like hardship duty.
Right. Tough place to work, logistically, technically.
Exactly. But when he returned decades later, specifically around 2013, he found a country that was, in his words, completely unrecognizable. It had transformed into this global superpower that just defied all his expectations from before.
And that contrast is key, isn't it? The massive physical transformation versus this persistent media distrust.
Precisely. It sets the stage perfectly for the narrative strategy we're talking about. The feeling is the world is utterly overloaded with data, statistics, reports, just facts and figures.
Yeah.
But it's kind of starved for emotional truth. And this is why the expert side had decided, okay, let's move away from the huge GDP numbers and focus instead on the human scale.
Exactly. And the sources really lean heavily on the work of director Malcolm Clark here, specifically his documentary Chai Miyu Yan Zishang. And we probably need to pause here and explain what that title means, because it's actually the key to the whole strategy.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just some poetic title, is it?
No, not at all. It translates pretty literally to above firewood, rice, oil, and salt. Culturally, this phrase represents the, The 7 essentials of daily life, the absolute basics. So by naming the film this way, the goal was explicitly stated. Put a human face on China's historic economic renaissance. Show how this huge change affects the absolute fundamentals of everyday existence. Success is only relevant, the director seems to argue, when you tie it to individual hopes, dreams, and struggles.
And the power of this approach, well, just comes alive in the specific stories he captured. I mean, take that profoundly moving story of the poor family moving from their remote village into a new modern apartment in the county seat. There's this moment where the mother, she's nervous but kind of odd, using the apartment elevator switch for the very first time in her life. Just think about that.
Yeah, or think about her little son's reaction during that move. When a heavy rainstorm hits, he doesn't panic or get scared. He actually exclaims with just sheer unadulterated excitement that their new home doesn't leak. That single detail, you know, it just encapsulates the difference between a life of vulnerability and a life of basic security, better than any housing statistic ever could.
And the stories aren't all just straightforward success stories either, are they?
Yeah.
They include the complexities, the duty, the sacrifice, like that village party secretary focused relentlessly on poverty alleviation.
He privately struggles, right? Complaining that the cost of gasoline for his work transport is actually higher than his 2,000 plus yuan monthly salary, which means his wife has to take construction jobs just so the family can make ends meet.
Yeah, but he keeps going. He perseveres. Calling it a non-negotiable mission entrusted by the party, it shows that personal cost alongside the dedication.
Exactly. Or then there's the acrobat.
Ah, yes, the acrobat. Grew up poor in rural Henan, trained incredibly hard, right? Became a star performer in Shanghai. And he feels this intense pride saying, I belong to Shanghai and Shanghai belongs to me. Like he owned his destiny through sheer effort.
But there's a but. There's always a but. That success comes with guilt. The painful realization that because of his demanding career, he can't spend more time with the grandparents who raised him back home.
That dual reality, the success and the sacrifice. That's where the narrative really lands, isn't it? It feels less like propaganda and more like, well, universally recognizable human conflict.
Precisely. These narratives, they kind of bypass the statistics and the political arguments. They show the shared human experience, hard work, struggle, optimism, the search for peace, family connections. This becomes a sort of universal language, as the source puts it. It resonates globally. And it proves the director's point. Chinese people are pretty much the same as us guys. When you see their individual successes and their sacrifices up close, the broader political rhetoric maybe starts to ring a little hollow.
Okay, so that's the emotional victory, potentially. But now we have to shift focus a bit to the execution, the actual craft of international communication. Because even with these genuine human stories, getting them across a language barrier, and frankly, an entrenched political wall, that presents enormous obstacles.
Oh, absolutely. The political difficulty is described as immense. The director, Clark, shared his own stark experience. He said, basically, if you say anything positive about China in the West, you're immediately accused of being in the pocket of China or bought and paid for by the government.
Wow, that's harsh.
Yeah, and this isn't just like online trolls. He claimed that continuing to make these kinds of balanced films means he will never get another Academy Award nomination.
Seriously, he said that.
That's what the source reports. That's the ultimate price, potentially, being paid for daring to present a more nuanced, humanized viewpoint.
That really puts the barrier to terrifying context. And beyond just the political cost, there's the constant translation challenge, right? Especially moving from Chinese to English. The source material highlights how difficult it is to translate culturally specific concepts, not just words, but entire sort of ideological packages.
Yeah, a perfect example given is the translation of Lushui Qingshan, which means green waters and mountains, or Xinshan, golden and silver mountains. You can't just translate that literally, word for word. It doesn't work. The conceptual weight is that environmental protection and preservation, the green waters and mountains, are themselves economic assets. They are sources of wealth, the gold and silver mountains.
Right. If you miss that whole context, the meaning just collapses.
Yeah.
There was an anecdote provided, wasn't there, about a leader meeting Margaret Thatcher and using this phrase. If it got translated literally in that diplomatic setting as, say, 1,000 ounces of gold, the cultural meaning that environmental stewardship is the path to long-term prosperity is instantly lost. It just sounds like a strange, abstract number.
Exactly. And this is why the technical craft of filmmaking, the actual visuals and editing, becomes absolutely paramount. Both the director and the producer focused heavily on the practical reality of subtitle length.
Right.
Mandarin, apparently, is spoken incredibly fast and efficiently, very dense informationally. When you translate it into English, the subtitles often end up much longer because English just requires more words, generally, to convey the same meaning.
Okay, so the audience is forced to just read, read, read,
Hmm?
and they miss the human moment happening on screen. They miss the face.
Exactly right. So the advice for international storytelling, based on this, is kind of threefold. Subtitles have to be concise, use shorter words whenever possible. They should appear quickly and disappear quickly so you're not constantly reading. But the most important advice, the crucial part, is that the picture must tell the emotional story.
That makes total sense. The director emphasized that a close-up portrait of a person's face can be more valuable than anything they say. The emotional truth, the strain, the pride, the hope, it's captured visually, which allows the audience to hopefully bypass the language barrier and truly connect with the person rather than being distracted by this endless stream of text at the bottom of the screen. So, okay, let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for us, for you listening? This deep dive today seems to confirm that the path to navigating a world that's just flooded with abstract data and, let's face it, deep political polarization. That path might be paved with genuine human-scale narratives. It seems to be about prioritizing the emotional truth, showing those everyday victories and defeats, like a mother discovering an elevator for the first time, or a family just achieving the simple dream of a roof that doesn't leak.
Yeah, and if we connect this back to the bigger sort of geopolitical picture, the director believes this kind of effort is actually a critical contribution to global stability, demonstrating the common humanity of the Chinese people, showing that the rise of China doesn't mean the demise of the West. That's seen as a tangible way to maybe avert what he calls the warming talk of an impending conflict between civilizations, trying to cool things down through understanding.
It's a really powerful realization, isn't it? That maybe the most effective tool in diplomacy might not be a complex trade agreement, but just a simple, honest story well told. So here's a final thought for you to consider. In your own life, when you're trying to communicate something challenging or complex, maybe it's a business plan, maybe it's just a personal viewpoint, are you leading with complex data and dry statistics? Or are you prioritizing that human touch, the thing that truly makes a story feel real and ultimately resonant? Something to think about. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.